Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and your moderator. And today I am really pleased because some of my favorite episodes ever of Pod Save Chocolate are interviews and tastings with chocolate makers. And today I've got really special friends who are going to be joining me. And let's just bring them up on stage. Tuta Aquino of Baianí Chocolates in São Paulo, Brazil. Welcome to Pod Save Chocolate.
Thanks so much, Clay. Thanks for having us. Unfortunately, Juliana is not going to be able to make it, and she apologizes immensely.
I'm sorry to hear that she's not feeling well. This is one of the challenges of doing something live. Fortunately, we're not canceling, a sold-out arena gig, right, at Madison Square Garden. For those of you who may not know, both Tuta and Juliana were in the music business in a prior career. Right. So, which is why I made the reference to that. I do want to remind everybody that you can go into the comments and give us a shout out. Let us know where in the world you're connecting from, and I'll get it up on the screen. And if you have any questions for Tuta during the course of this, you can get them into the YouTube live chat or the LinkedIn or Facebook comments. I'll get them up on screen, and we'll give Tuta an opportunity to answer those questions. So, Tuta, just a little bit of history, right? So I would have met you for the first time, right, physically in São Paulo in 2017. So I was invited by Marco Lessa, right, and to speak at the Chocolate Festival in Ilhéus in 2017, and I connected through São Paulo on my way to Ilhéus. I was in Lima at the time. And through, I believe, our mutual friend, Zélia Frangione, you and Juliana just graciously invited me to spend my time in São Paulo in your home, which was just, a real treat for me. Hotels are not my favorite places to be, but there were a number of firsts. I mean, this was the first time I got to to taste a tapioca pancake. This is, I believe it might have been the first time I got a chance to taste jabuticaba, right, which is like my favorite fruit in the world, right? And then you followed separately as up in the festival in Ilhéus. But let's go back further. So you're in the music business. Juliana is in the music business. But I understand that you were family friends when you were both growing up. Was that in São Paulo or was that in Bahia?
No, it's great, Clay. Well, first of all, you're always welcome. The open invitation, not only for our homes here in São Paulo, but also at the farm. You're very welcome. You're a good friend. You're a good friend of chocolate and cacao. So it gives us even more incentive to have you close and around us. It's always a pleasure to have great conversations, engaging conversations with you. But going back to your question, I think a lot of people don't realize that, Bahia has been, in the forefront of the cacao crop industry for over a century, actually more than that, and the commercial crop. And my great-grandfather was one of the pioneers that came to the region, with the intention of putting together this new adventure of getting cacao farms together in that region, due to the fact that the climate is so similar to the Amazon climate where cacao originates from. And so part of Juliana's family, also a great-granduncle, who was actually the guy who brought my great-grandfather over as an incentive. and said that this could be a great opportunity to really change their lives in this new region that was being opened and offered by the government. So our families in many generations were intertwined. And when my father, who inherited this farm in Bahia from my great-grandfather, then my grandfather, moved to Ilhéus, to Itabuna, actually, which is very next, 30 kilometers away from there, to take care of this farm. Had recently married my mom, and I was born there. I was raised in that farm up until I was 10 years old. And their closest friends at that time were Juliana's parents. So Juliana's brother, who is a few months younger than I am, is my oldest friend. And Juliana was my sister's oldest friend for the longest time. So we were almost like cousins in a way, but we never had any interest other than that, up until the moment where music took us in different paths. It took me to New York, and Juliana started singing as a backup singer in Salvador, Bahia, for carnival bands, very popular bands. And somehow my sister reconnected us, and then we ended up getting married, being together. We have 2 sons.
Yep.
And there's a lot more to the story.
I'm sure there is a lot more to the story. You were a record producer in New York City, as I recall. Yeah.
Right. I came to New York actually to study audio engineering. There was a famous school called the Institute of Audio Research in the West Village. I mean, you probably could remember that. They used to do great advertisements at the Village Voice. So
yes.
Anyway, so that took me to New York in 1981. And as an exchange for being able to be, maintained there, I had to work for my dad on his other business, which was representing American companies that sold research equipment for laboratory. And I gave him support for that. That supported me in my first couple of years in New York. After I was done with school, I ended up finding my own path and ended up working in the music business for over 12, 15 years. And then had a studio in New York, in Manhattan, and mainly in the pop and remix world of dance music, which had to do with my background of being a very precocious DJ when I was 14 years old here in Brazil.
Right. So, but as a child growing up on this cacao farm, did you think that cacao would be in your future, and chocolate would be in your future? Or was this something you wanted to get as far away from as you possibly could?
That's an amazing question. I think the fact that I took me to New York, I have these two and I think Juliana does too. These incredible, probably we're very, very at ease, both at the farm environment and also at an urban environment. And I think that's due to the fact that, I lived for these first few years at the farm, and it was very happy, first 10 years. Every vacation afterwards, when I was a teenager, was back at the farm. So a lot of liberty, having a horse, being able to walk around and, having the smells, the Atlantic rainforest was really embedded in our DNA. And I never wanted not to be there. I always lingered. I always had the longing, after I lived in New York for so many years, of going back to my roots and really enjoying that home feeling of being at the farm, but not as a farmer. Never as a farmer, ever. I never had the intention of being a farmer. I was very, very happy being in the music business, and it really fulfilled me as in whatever hats I used in the industry, eventually as a producer, when I, groomed my profession. But the farm was always in the back of my mind because it was my home place.
So you said you were in New York in the early 1980s. I mean, one of the things about that is that there is a small chance that we actually walked past each other. I mean, New York, even though it's a big city, is small enough so that could have happened. But people will remember that in the late 1980s, there was the introduction of witch's broom, which devastated the Brazilian cacao crop. Was that something that your family lived through as well? Debbie, did you have the same sort of devastation of the cacao in the late 1980s?
Yes. Well, my father had already moved back to São Paulo and had a secondary business, but he was very, very fortunate to have really invested in his farm throughout the 60s and replanting a lot of new cacao trees and really taking care of the farm. And throughout the 70s, when the prices of cacao were like, going up, very much like today,
Yes.
we had a great moment there. The peak was around 1979. My father was really surfing this wave of having invested a lot and now reaping the benefits financially, but still had this incredible love and really devoted a lot of time to the farm too. And not only as a source, I think, of extra income, but also as a source of pleasure for him. He really enjoyed that. So in 1989, when the witch's broom was introduced, my dad continued to invest in the farm against a lot of recommendations and against the odds of the region, because he had the ability to have an extra income from another business to be able to support the farm. On the other hand, Juliana's father, who owned the farm that we now explore, that we'll go into later, didn't have the same fortune as well as maybe 95% of the other farmers in the region, and that most of them went bankrupt, and the crisis was incredible.
So for people who may not be aware, people know the Amazon rainforest, right, as being the biggest rainforest in the South American continent. Yeah. You mentioned the Atlantic rainforest, and people may not know that rainforest, also called the Mata Atlântica in Portuguese, is the second largest rainforest on the South American continent. And it has a very, very special place in the history and folklore of Brazilian cacao as sort of being the backbone. And there's this movement, I think might be a good way to do it, to see what it is that can be done to save not just cacao, but the Mata Atlântica, and using a very traditional growing system called cabruca, which is under shade, in order to be able to try to restore things. So at the Fazenda Santa Rita, which is the original name of the farm, right, which is in Juliana's family, not your family, right, as I've just learned. Do you know where Santa Rita came from? It's obviously a Catholic saint, I would guess, Saint Rita, who I'm not familiar with. But is there some story about Santa Rita?
No, absolutely. I think Juliana's family, the Pinheiro family, that's her last name, which is pine in English.
Any relation to the Pinheiros of the neighborhood in São Paulo?
No,
or is it
not
just
really.
a very common name? It's just a very common name.
No,
Okay.
it's just, the Pinheiros is an illusion of there was a lot of pine trees in that neighborhood, so it used to be called Pinheiros. But I think her father's family had been in the region also for that long, as I explained earlier. And her father had several brothers, and the oldest brother was a very accomplished and it was a great businessman in terms of being an entrepreneur and creating opportunities for the family. And they also inherited farms, and they also were able to explore that the right way and create a very large business that included, some car dealerships and a timber company and large, vast land not too far from where Santa Rita is, but also working with rubber, with trees, with rubber trees. And her father was the youngest man of the 5 or 6 brothers, and he had a little bit of an issue with the older brother. So at one point, he ended up getting out of the family business. And with that money, he bought Fazenda Santa Rita in 1973. And it was actually a collection of farms that totaled about 400 hectares. And he named the collective farm Santa Rita because he was devoted to this saint. And this saint is known for helping lost causes and creating miracles.
And cacao might be thought of as
exactly.
It's
so
difficult.
It was very appropriate.
Maybe not a lot cause, but difficult for
not
sure.
Not knowing, but he also already named it Santa Rita, due to the devotion he had to this saint.
Okay. Well, today it's called Vale Potumuju. And so where does, I hope I'm getting the pronunciation correct.
Perfect.
My Brazilian Portuguese is a little bit iffy on some of the pronunciations. But where does the name change come from? So why moving from fazenda, which is just the Portuguese word for farm, basically, or like hacienda. So where does, so Vale, naively it's valley, right? I don't know, but where does the Potumuju come from? Like a river or stream or something?
No, Potumuju is great. You were doing the great pronunciation. Your Portuguese is impeccable. You're doing good. Next time we'll do it in Portuguese, as a matter of fact.
No.
So anyway, I think, as you might know, being devoted to Saint Rita or Santa Rita couldn't be exclusive to Gabriel, which is my deceased father-in-law's name. There were several other Fazenda Santa Ritas around us in the region, and that could really create a confusion. And not only that, we thought that we could really use something that was more significant of where geographically we are located, something that had meaning within the Cabruca concept, which, as you said, we leave a lot of the native rainforest trees up as shade for the cacao trees. It's an agroforestry system that's very important in the region. And Potumuju is a tree that has very particular, interesting things about it. One of them is very, very tall tree with a canopy all the way up above, which is great for the cacao orchards because it leaves a lot of room for ventilation, and it gives you that midday sunshade that is more dangerous than the heat is biggest at that time of day. It has a very interesting seed with ears that remind you of elephant ears. And the center of it's a spined protection where the seeds are nestled in. So the seed actually, by the way of traveling through the wind, has better opportunities to reproduce farther from that original mother tree. Once you get to the ground, the spines keep any rodents or any other predators from taking the seeds out, which gives the tree a lot more of a chance to become a new tree. So we were so enchanted with the story about that we wanted to use it. And then maybe consciously or unconsciously, we discovered that at the end of the word, we have tu and ju, which is Tuta and Juliana. So Potumuju. And that only came to us later. Trust me, it wasn't.
It was there subliminally in the back of your mind all the time. So for people who are watching this, who may not be, who are not listening, but who are watching it, what I do is I have up on screen right now a map of southern Bahia, and it's not easy to see here, but there's a post on TheChocolateLife that you can go to where this map is. And so there is the major city, which is where my cursor is, of Ilhéus, right? For some reason, I want to pronounce that as SH, Ilhéus or Ilhéus.
You could say it with both ways, but in Bahia, you would be with just the S, Ilhéus.
Okay, all right. So I'm giving away where I learned. It's like when people listen to my Spanish, they go, "Oh yeah, you learned Spanish in Mexico," right? Because of the way particular pronunciations that I use. But here's Ilhéus, which is the center of cacao. It is the port by which cocoa leaves the country and cocoa arrives in the country. Is Ilhéus. Where the map is where Vale Potumuju is, down here. Right. And the furthest north, so I've never been there. I've been to Itabuna and around Itabuna, right, which is west of Ilhéus, but also up as north as Itacaré. So I've been up there as well. So these are sort of my the areas that I've been in Bahia. So this map is on the post for this episode, which people can look at right now, which is a run of show. And there's, examples of some of the varieties of cacao that are produced on the farm. There is some albino, there's some white bean cocoa. Is this a
Catongo, we
catongo?
call them catongos.
A catongo? Which for people who look at white bean and go automatically say, oh, it's a criollo, the answer is no. It's an albino forastero, which suggests that the albino forastero was a predecessor to ancient criollos and then modern criollos, that white beans are a recessive trait in pretty much every population of cocoa. But here's an example of what a catongo looks like. This is during fermentation. You've done a cut test partway through fermentation. These things still look wet.
Yeah. Right. We constantly monitor the fermentation process, and obviously we do evaluations at the end of this. Obviously, we do several other evaluations, the smell and the temperature evaluations throughout the process. But at the end of our fermentation cycles, we do a cut test of 25 of these seeds. I mean, they now are beans. The seed, they're not viable as seeds anymore once they're fermented, but to evaluate how the fermentation has performed.
Gotcha. Right. This is the two of you on the farm. We have to get a picture of Juliana in here. This is at Vale Potumuju.
That's at Vale Potumuju. It's up on a hill, and down below, far away, you could see the farm center. This is a pasture that we have. It's a beautiful view. And in the back, I must note that a lot of these areas that look like forests could have cacao trees under them, could be orchards. So the Cabruca system really hides a lot of what is the plantation of cacao under the canopy.
Yeah, it's neither a high density planting system, nor is it a high productivity planting system.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. And if what you're doing is you're not planting the trees on even centers, right? You have to move around the tree roots for all the other trees that are growing in order to be able to get at. So it's an interesting planting system. I think it represents a very, Brazilian approach to things, which is interesting. This is again, getting involved in opening pods on the farm.
Juliana loves to do that. She loves to do it. Every time she's there, she's doing this.
Right. And looking back to this previous image, if you've never been to Brazil, right, and you haven't been to the countryside, especially if you've been to Brazil, you've only been to Rio, you've only been to one of the big cities, you've only been to Salvador, you've only been into São Paulo, you're missing a lot of what makes Brazil really, really special. You don't have to go up to Manaus in the Amazon or up to Pará along the Xingu to get into the jungle, right? You can literally drive. I remember driving out towards Claudia Schmidt's place, which is in the state of São Paulo. I mean, it's insanely gorgeous. I mean, all you have to do is leave the cities. It's really, really beautiful. So go do that. And if you've never been if you're a chocolate fan and you've never been to a cacao farm and you've never actually sat down and spent a couple of hours opening up pods, right, in a group setting, this is very often done as a group activity, you are missing, number one, a real understanding of what it means, right, to harvest cacao, right, and how much work it takes to do this, right. Plus, it can be a lot of fun because it is very often this group activity. So I recommend that you have an opportunity to go to that. And there the two of you are. Gosh, I mean, it's amazing. A power couple in Brazilian chocolate. But there are several of them. So I wanted to share these images. There's a link to the Vale Potumuju website. There's the link to the Baianí website. I think this is the farming center. Let's see. I have no idea what it's saying.
This is aerial. Yeah, that's a drone shot, and it really shows the lushness of the green shades that we have in the Atlantic rainforest, and that's probably one of the amazing things that I did not know I missed so much.
Yeah.
And that I really lavish into whenever I'm there. We have now a beautiful home that we built at the farm, which is the largest, tiled, colored roof there. and it's nestled right at the farm center. So we're in the center of the activities, and you can see some of the other homes for the other some of the collaborators that live at the farm. We have a school full-time, a beautiful project that we're now very, very proud of, also, that we could talk a little more about later. But
well, so but I think that's, I want to point out a couple of things. Number one is that I have been to a number of farms. So I was at Jim Lucas and Lola Gedion's farm, Fazenda Venturosa. I was at Enrique Almeida, which is Fazenda
we were
Sagarana.
there together, as a matter of fact.
We were there together, absolutely. And then I was also at the family farm of Rogerio Camé and Claudia Gamba. I forget the name of the farm.
Bonanza.
Fazenda Bonanza. And the infrastructure, I mean, this infrastructure may not be typical, right, of cacao farms, right? But it is not uncommon to see this level of infrastructure and to have housing for the people who are working, to have a school on site for the children of the people who are working. These are all not uncommon aspects of cacao farming, and I assume other kinds of farming in Brazil. It was really, really lovely to see this image, because it reminded me so much of what I saw at Sagarana and Venturosa and Bonanza, right, in a newer style. Again, and and several others. I mean, my mind is running faster than my mouth can talk about it, and I'm forgetting them. But really, really beautiful. So this is you. This is in the drying.
This is our drying tunnels, with a very particular, a very specific type of drying system that I designed and created, with these like sliding drawers that use the original drying deck structure as shade. They use that. So we slow dry our cacao beans to be able to, as much as possible, volatilize the extra acidity, which is common trait in our region, to have a little more acidity in the cacao varieties, but also to be able to have a lot more control of the process and create our style of taste for our beans, which by the way, thank God we were somewhat successful already. I wish I had more beans to supply to the world, because I get requests almost every month from a different chocolate maker.
So that's a question. How much of the production at Vale Potumuju is actually consumed by Baianí?
I would say about a fine quality cacao, because obviously we're not able to make every bean quality bean, so we get damaged pods. We still live unfortunately with the witch's broom, taking away the quality from the beans, because they get a little bit infected, and obviously those are put aside. We never use those, and sometimes even the planned perfect fermentations don't come out as good as possible. Juliana has a very high standard of quality that we keep as our trademark. So a lot of I would say of the total production of the farm, we can manage to get about 50 to 60% of quality beans out of that, which is very high for the local or the region's average. But let's say 50%. And out of those 50%, we now are using about 50%. I feed the competition with the other half, not only in Brazil, but also
let's go there briefly. I want to do these tastings, but I really want to talk about this. And this is where I'm sort of sad Juliana won't be able to join us, because she is one of the authors on this fabulous book.
Exactly.
Onde cresce o chocolate? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, you say cresce.
And which means what?
Where does chocolate grow?
Where does chocolate grow? Okay. So one of the things that I think the craft chocolate community has really, really leaned into is this history of sharing with other makers. Right?
True.
But there's something special I noticed about the Brazilian community, right? Number one is that even though Brazil is a vast country, right? Everybody knows each other. No matter if you're up, at least that's my experience. Is that not quite true?
No. Within the community of cacao and chocolate, maybe.
No, absolutely. I'm talking about within the craft chocolate makers. So there's that component. But is it also? It seems to be my experience that there is a compared with other countries, there are more women who are involved in the Brazilian craft chocolate community than in other countries. So there, what do you think makes the community so special?
Well, I think we learned about bean to bar in the United States. I mean, our first exposure was by researching into that business and trying to get our beans sold to, a company. And my target, which ended up being, the best arrow that I shot ever at a target, and then I eventually hit it, was to be able to sell beans to Dandelion Chocolate, because I determined that they didn't have any Brazilian origin yet within their amazing origin catalog. And the fact that they only make single origin and no inclusions, only dark bars, attracted us even more. So we attended I think the first time was the 2016 Northwest Chocolate Festival and the Unconference, which was a great moment of understanding that this sharing was something that was already a model for the bean to bar industry worldwide. And that really attracted us. And that really was something that made us think that this could be something special to be involved in somehow, right? And once we came back to this,
if I'm actually thinking about it, I probably met you in Seattle at the Northwest Chocolate Festival in 2016. That might actually be
or maybe in the streets of New York. We were like waiting for
for some bagel somewhere. I mean, one of the things that I love about the book, and one of the things about it is there's this timeline. Right. And I'm going through, and for example, I would have met Arcelia Gallardo, the founder of Mission Chocolate, because she did some work at Dandelion, very early on in her career. Sure. So, and I met Todd Massonis, who is one of the founders of Dandelion, in 2010 at the Salon du Chocolat in Paris. And I noticed that there is an entry for the 2010 Salon du Chocolat in the timeline for this book. So there is, some bit of the universe connecting us all the way through.
Absolutely. So I think the sense of community in Brazil, and going back to your question regarding, how many women we see in Brazil, which I must agree with you. I think there are a lot of women involved in bean to bar chocolate making throughout the world. As a matter of fact, not too long ago, Juliana invited a few of these women from the United States, Canada, and Europe to come to Vale Potumuju about 2 months ago to have a girl day out at the farm, week out at the farm. Yeah. And obviously I was not allowed, and which I think is great. And apparently they have a great time. And these were all leading women in the chocolate industry from companies that are very, very important in Canada, in the United States, in Europe, and they're major players. So I think women have different abilities in terms of sensibilities, sensory abilities, and they are, I think, a lot more in tune with the very specific nuances of not only the chocolate making, but also in the cacao area. Not the farming necessarily, but as far as sensory is concerned, as far as the sensitivity and care that it needs to be devoted to it. I think it may be a coincidence that within our more closed group of chocolate makers, we have a lot of very, very important women. Arcelia is one of you. I mean, the authors of this book, I don't know if you mentioned, they were all women.
Oh yeah, no. It's it's an amazing group. Arcelia Claudio Gamba, so she's one of the with her husband Rogerio Camay, are at Mestizo Chocolate. Juliana Galech has her own business. Obviously, we know Luciana Montero, who is at Ara Cacao. I think the only one I don't know if I've met, was Mariana Bueno.
Maybe not.
But also one of the things that I noticed is that, there has been a real strong sense of unity around the phrase bean to bar in Brazil, right? That, the group of makers says this is what it is, right? And this is how we're going to refer to it. And that's something that hasn't happened in other countries. And that may be part of the success, right? Is that as a group, you've been able to be laser focused on this is what we mean when we use this phrase.
Yeah, I think that has to do also with the concept that dates back to around 2017 when we first, officially met here in Brazil. Is that upon our Baianí, Juliana and I, research into the bean to bar market, we ended up stumbling upon Arcelia, who had just moved to Brazil and was just starting her mission brand. And Arcelia was very enthusiastic about sharing her knowledge and inviting a lot of the up and coming makers here in Brazil. And bean to bar is very new here from the late 2010s, except for Ama, which has been in the business since the mid 2000s. So Arcelia invited all of us to tastings at her place and even taught us a little more about what chocolate making in the bean to bar industry meant. And out of that, I think we all came up with the concept of creating an association. And we were 7 brands, and Baianí included, and we were co-founders of this association that now is about 60 brand strong in Brazil, right? We fluctuate between 55 and 65. And we all have been part of the board of this association. Juliana was president. Arcelia was president for a while too. I have been vice president for the last 2 terms. I was financial director. And we put together a lot of effort in trying to create this community and concentrating, because first, we know that Brazil has a very particular situation where it's a cacao producing country, is a cacao consumer country, is a cacao processing country, and it's a chocolate making country now. So, we do everything here. And I think we really wanted to value this and try to, really fuel this new industry and try to bring it out as organized as possible. It doesn't go to say that it doesn't go with the hardships, because it's very, very hard to get people to, do the community consensus of what, each one thinks of. But it's been successful. We'll put together a lot of events, yearly events here, the chocolate weeks that we put together. And I think that has a lot to do with what you're saying. This sense of community is kept also by this effort, by this directive board that is doing a lot of work towards that.
So you mentioned tasting, so that's a good segue into the rest of where we're going to spend our time. But before we do that, there's a question from Georgia Martone, who's from Bologna in Brazil, who's watching. So she wants to know, where do you sell most of your cacao? When you export your cacao and you sell it, are you selling it to buyers in the United States, in the EU? Who's buying your cacao? Okay,
great. Thanks for the question. And I think I'll open up numbers here. And we've been investing in replanting the cacao at the farm. Originally, this farm had 100 hectares of cacao. It was very productive. It had an average yield of about 60 tons a year in the height before witch's broom, and 60 tons, right? But not of specialty cacao, because that was not my deceased father-in-law's business at that point, and there wasn't market for that anyway. So when we took over, the farm had about 70% remaining, and a lot of it was really not with the ideal density of 1,000 to 1,100 plants per hectare, which is, a 3x3 spacing. So we have about 35 hectares now, still with like different ages. So they're not 35 hectares of productive cacao. And that yields us about 20 tons, between 15 and 20 tons. We've had a couple of issues now, and I think whoever's in cacao knows that, we've went through 2 years of major climatic changes, and that really affected our productivity too. So my first target and aim was to sell to Dandelion Chocolate. So Dandelion Chocolate today is the only client that we sell to outside of Brazil. Because, as I explained earlier, I say out of the 15 tons a year, 7.5 is quality cacao. And out of those 7.5, we take up about 3.5 to 4. So there's not a lot to go around.
Okay.
So Dandelion takes about 3 a year, 2.5 to 3 a year. They do micro batches of a Vale Potumuju bar, which is named after the region, like any other, of their origins. And the remainder, I end up selling here in Brazil because it's not enough quantity to export. So that hopefully will change, because I've been planting 3,000 to 4,000 new seedlings every year for the last 5 years. So these trees eventually, exponentially, will start producing. Hopefully in the 4 or 5 years to come, we'll have 50% more production.
And before we jump into the next point that I want to ask, we have a quick shout out from Chocolates de Luxe in Germany. Greetings from Germany. And for anybody who might be watching this in the EU, you can purchase Baianí products from Chocolates de Luxe online. There is a link to the Chocolates de Luxe website on the post for today's episodes. You can also buy them here in the United States from a Bar and Cocoa, I understand. Yes. Right, and the link to Bar and Cocoa is also on the page. Really quickly.
Thank you.
And so when you say Dandelion, do you say Dandelion US or Dandelion Japan or both?
Just Dandelion US for now.
Okay, really quickly. So let's get to the part that I think many people are waiting for, which is the tasting. Yes. We have 5 bars, and we're going to run through this. So 2 of the bars I have, there's a Chocolate Leite, which is a 57%, and if I thought about it really hard, I could get the 57% in Portuguese, and a Chocolate Intenso, which is a 70%. But both of these have bars on them which say vintaged. So tell me what you mean by vintaged, please.
Okay, you were very lucky to be able to snatch a few of the last vintage bars. I think this is something that we always planned on. Juliana really had an idea on. Just so everybody knows, I mean, in our post-harvest process, we ended up coming up with, the fermentation protocol, a drying protocol, and we also have an aging protocol. So we age our beans, every bean that is of good quality, between 60 and 75 days. Because we realized as we were pushing the time limit there, the beans got better in terms of sensory taste, sensory value. And Juliana was really responsible for getting a lot of that evaluated and kept notes. And we ended up really stopping at the 60 to 75 day aging process. But nonetheless, a lot of the real nice batches that she thought could get better, we aged for longer. And some of those were aged for a year, maybe 2 years even. And then once they were aged for those 2 years, and she was satisfied with the sensory notes, and she thought that this was worthy of now becoming chocolate, she would make the chocolate mass out of it at a whatever percentage, 70 and above, and then mature these or age these as chocolate, untempered, just blocks of chocolate. And some of those went on to be aged for another year too. So that particular, I think 57% is a 2018 harvest, if I'm not mistaken, or 19.
Yeah, it doesn't say it anywhere.
It doesn't say it. Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
We have a generic vintage
that's okay.
label there. Right. And then the traces, I mean, of taste compared to what a regular 57% dark milk chocolate would taste like is completely different. So
I want to let you know, and I can let other people know that there actually is science behind aging the beans.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That there is some equilibration, so there is some distribution, is probably a better way, of the chemicals in the beans during the first roughly 90 to 120 days after the beans come off the drying pad, right? But what's really interesting is that chocolate makers have never had to worry about it because it takes longer than that for the beans to get from the farm to their factories in North America and in Europe. Right?
Exactly.
It only becomes an issue, right, when you're a farm to bar chocolate company, right, or you're buying beans. So if you take beans that are right off the drying pad and you process them into chocolate right away, there's often this sort of wet cardboard flavor which is associated with them, and that's where it's coming from. And so the beans need to be matured. So it's really a cool thing. Just a couple of things. Number one is that your friends at Chocolat Deluxe said this bar is sold out in Germany. So that's a very, very cool thing.
Yeah.
We do have another question from Georgia, but we're going to get to it at the end. One of the things I got to say, this is just a brilliantly beautiful mold. Right?
Thank you. Yeah.
You know, it's 6 squares, so each one of the 6 letters of Baianí. It's like Askinosie. Their bar is, each square has got 1 letter of it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The
it was a little
of
bit
it,
of an inspiration from them too.
Well, you know, Sean has inspired a lot of people, including me. You know, I did get this from you back at the end of the March, and I am in Arizona, so trying to keep it in good shape has been, I mean, the aroma of the milk here it is very subtle. It's not overwhelming. I know that we're tasting different bars here. There is this mild cocoa note. There's no hint of sweetness on it at all. The bite and chew are what I would expect from the snap. Right? There's a little bit of sweetness that coming through, but you get the richness and roundness of the milk, right? But this just really, really clean, clear cocoa presentation throughout the entire bar. I mean, it really is quite lovely. You know, dark milk chocolates are my favorite kind of chocolate to eat when I just want to enjoy sitting down and doing this. Right? And this is exactly the kind of chocolate. I just want to put it in my mouth.
Exactly. And one thing that
really it's going to put a smile on my face.
Attracts me a little bit too is I think there's a little bit of a malted taste that you get on, you know, our regular bar. Maybe not as much on because the aged bar has a little more of a mellow aspect from what I remember. We're completely sold out of those. I had taken the last few to New York is when we met, right, Clay? And you know, I made a point of you having one of those to take back.
Tasting is always an interesting thing. Now that you've said malt, and knowing what malted milk is, I mean, there is a very, very faint hit of this, right?
Exactly.
Early on, right? That, oh no, and then it comes back again. So I'm thinking of just take malted milk powder and put malted milk powder in good milk, right?
Yeah.
And that does come through. But I'm thinking about it because you mentioned it, not necessarily because I got it for the first time. Again, the people at Chocolats Deluxe point out about the mold is that the word Baianí has an accent over the last I.
Right.
And that accent is in the mold for the bar. So yes, pointing it out, it is a lovely bar. And they're just beautiful bars. And as I recall, you do a bar that is like maybe white chocolate that is got something that colors it green.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, that's our lemongrass bar, which is a very limited edition. We had issues with that bar. It's funny that you mentioned because we hadn't had a batch of that bar for the longest time. And today the girls are molding some of those. I'm going to ask somebody to bring a bar so I can at least show it. And now Juliana came up with a great concept, which is something that we were always a little bit, not skeptical, but maybe afraid of embracing, which is, you know, going into the vegan world with some sort of vegan milk. And we end up actually finding now that that recipe, after doing a shelf life test of, over 120 days now, with the vegan milk being oat milk, works so much better, and the bar lasts a lot longer, which is the issue originally with the bar that only had a 30-day validity, because we actually used the fresh lemongrass into the melanger, and a lot of the moisture just oxidizes and makes it oxidize.
Right. Well, I remember seeing it and tasting it when I was in São Paulo, just as lockdowns were happening in 2020. So for the chocolate festival, that was what was there. And I remember looking at it and being startled by just what the color was. It was just a beautiful bar in a beautiful mold. So let's go to the next one, the Chocolate Intenso. So these are all the same beans.
Well, I think it's important to note that we only work with micro batches. So every one of our ferment boxes that are either 60 results into 120 dried kilos of cacao after it's been dried, fermented and dried, or 240 kilos. Juliana doesn't make blends for Baianí anymore. So we have now, a lot of documentation that she creates when she evaluates each one of these batches, and she approves it for one chocolate or another. It'll be either the 88 or 100 or 70, or eventually something that goes with inclusions. And each one of these batches have maybe about 10 or 12 different roasting profiles that she indicates to the girls that she wants those beans treated as such. So everything is micro batch.
Okay. So it's good to know, because right now just another quick one, the Brazilian spices bar, I'm really jealous because I didn't actually get to taste the Brazilian spices bar.
I think
all right. But what I want to say is I got the Chocolate Intenso, which is the 70%.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is the aroma on this is really quite complex. I mean, there is this chocolate coming through, but there's this, I want to say, vegetal quality to it. So an herbaceousness, which is there. It's not floral. It's not fruity. The complexity is not acidity, but there's something that says, this comes from a farm, right? which is often, it's not very common.
Well,
oh wow.
I would say, and I don't want to, steer you in any direction, but what gets me is that there's a little bit of a dried banana in there, and taste in this, there's a very, very mild acidity that takes me to the banana acidity when it's dried.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, because that's, also something that, as whoever is watching us now knows, a lot of us in cacao farms also have a lot of banana trees, because we need to use them as shade when the trees are young. So
I want to say is that the banana is not on the nose, and it doesn't hit you right up front, but as the chocolate clears the mouth, the banana is very, very evident. It's weird to say acidity with banana, but I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's not acidity, but with the dried banana.
Yeah, but there is a little bit of, again, sort of the dried banana, maybe the inside, maybe sometimes astringency can be a very good thing, and in this particular case, it's a good thing. The other one is that it's probably about 22, 23 degrees centigrade here. So it's about 74, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a little warm, but the texture of this bar is just incredibly soft. You put it in your mouth and you bite through it, and it's very, very soft, softer than the snap would lead you to believe that it was, right? Which is really, really interesting. So texturally, it's like the difference between an unripe banana and a very ripe banana, right? So when you think about it, and so, taking the banana analogy to this, and again, there's just this wonderful, it's just this long finish, and the banana is coming through,
And I
it's
think
rounded out by the
is
chocolate.
also, yeah, this last note you made, it has a lot to do, I think, with the aged bar, with the aged cacao and the aged chocolate, because the original, I mean, the current, I mean, the everyday bar, the 70% dark roast, which is the one that you're having, is really usually has a little more punch to it. So I think that is a particular trace of that vintage bar.
Right. So I do also want to point out, number one, is that the packaging is beautiful.
Thank you.
Right. And you use different colors to signify different lines of bars. You take great use of the inside of the bar, inside of the package as well. I noticed that this one was made for the non-Brazilian market because it's in English, whereas many of the others are in Portuguese. I also learned that on the top flap, right, it's got red, yellow, clay, and I'm a redhead named Clay, so I'm a big fan just of that. You do talk about the terroir. You find out, where in Brazil everything is located. So in terms of all of the information that should be on the front of a bar like this, all of the information is on the front of the package, right? But you're using the rest of the real estate really, really well. This is also this envelope style with the little notch, right, is easily reclosable, which is a big thing. And even though it looks like these are all hand wrapped, are they all hand wrapped?
They are. For now, they still are. We're debating now with the fact that we're growing and labor has becoming really a major issue here. We are now facing possibility of using just a recyclable envelope.
But understand. But what I do want to say is that unlike many other hand wrapped bars, you can take the chocolate out of the wrap and put it back into the envelope without any problem whatsoever and reclose it so that it looks like this. I mean, so it passes all those tests as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Now, what's interesting about the 88% is that vegetal note, which is on the 70%, just is really ramped up on the nose. There's a sort of green, and it's not necessarily, it's like sort of wet grass or wet hay. Maybe something that's slightly moving into geranium, which is a very, very specific aroma, as well as a flavor. I don't know if that makes sense, right?
No, it does make sense. And I must make the point here that this is my favorite bar. It has been my favorite bar for many years. And obviously the micro batches make it different every time, but Juliana does a real good job in terms of evaluating and, the batches that are going to be as close as possible to what the original intention of hers as a chocolate maker in making just a 12% sugar, 88%. And these batches are hard to find. We had 2 years of not coming up with batches that were worthy of the 88 and 100% bars that we sell. But I tell you, I think this herbal, almost a lot of people that, are a little more in tune, ask if there's any mint added to it for some reason, because that's their interpretation. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But I get exactly what you get. I get that early morning dew smell.
Yes, absolutely. It's
right.
It's rained overnight, or
exactly.
or the dew has formed, and you're going out and you're just kicking the grass and all of it, and you get that. And it's not mown grass. It's not mown grass. It is that. It's a very, very specific. The other thing I want to say is that vegetal note is on the nose. It appears to be a little more heavily roasted than some of the other ones are. So, which comes through at the very end. Right. And also it's a very different texture. And I don't know why it's a different texture from either of the other two bars. It's not as soft. And the higher cocoa percentage you get, often the higher fat content you get. So that's sort of weird thinking about that aspect of what leads to the texture. But one of the things that I really want to say about this is that the 70% doesn't eat like a 70%. it eats like something which is a lower percentage,
A
but
lower
it's not a
percentage.
sweet. But it's not a sweet. If you're a fan of high cocoa content chocolates, but sometimes find that above 90 or 100 is just way too intense for you, this 88% is going to be right in your wheelhouse. I mean, this is.
Absolutely. And appreciate you saying that, because it's one of my arguments with the 70%, because when people go, oh, 70 might be too much for me, I'm like, look, indulge me, just indulge me. And they taste it, and they're very surprised that it's not so, because there's a lot of work that we do in the fermentation and drying to be able to tone down a lot of what's quote unquote more aggressive tastes in the highest percentage bars. So,
and what it also does is it highlights one of the advantages of being what I call farm to table chocolate, right? Which is a phrase I want to promote the use of. Because when people say farm to bar, that may be one thing, but I know what a farm to table restaurant is. And part of what a farm to table restaurant is the person who's serving you can tell you about where all the ingredients come from and everything that you're making. So I really love the farm to table aspect of this. But it points out that one of the values of being a chocolate maker who's that closely associated with the farm is it gives you the luxury of that kind of specificity. These beans fermented this way, roasted this way, are perfect for a chocolate which has a flavor profile of X and Y and Z. And if you're removed, right, because you're in another country, right, you don't have that kind of flexibility because you don't have that specificity, right?
Yeah.
And for anybody who wants to know, I mean, these first three bars, they're technically excellent. I mean, there are no obvious. The only thing I would say is you're underfilling the mold slightly, and so there are these wings that creep up the inside of the bar.
Well, that's another issue that we're not going to get into.
Well, but unlike many other bars, because of the way you're wrapping it and because of the style of packaging, these wings aren't flaking off, right, and causing damage to the front surface of the bar. I don't know about, but I visited Dandelion and before they went public, and they had somebody whose job it was part of the day was to scrape the wings off the back of the bars before they were wrapped. It's pretty intense. We got two more bars. We're at an hour. And we do have one more question from Georgia that I want to get to. But the next bar is the Caipirinha bar. So Caipirinha is a cachaça, cocktail, and this is a Caipirinha inclusions. So does not contain alcohol. So lime zest and aged cachaça. So
well, I mean, we're going into, I mean, this and the last bar are probably the two most labor intensive and time consuming bars we produce here, because the idea, Juliana actually created a cachaça Easter egg for our first participation in Easter competitions here in Brazil in 2021 when we moved to this factory. There you go. So these are all
this is lime powder.
The lime zest that had been soaked in cachaça and dehydrated. So
gotcha. And then powder.
We won an award with the cachaça bar, and then she was like, well, cachaça is just too, and I had this concept about really caipirinha being obviously becoming so popular worldwide as a drink that you can go in any bar in the world now and have a caipirinha. The bartenders will know exactly what you're asking for, right? And the cachaças have been exported now from Brazil. And just so people that don't know, cachaça is the Brazilian rum. So it comes from sugar cane, and it's a distilled, liquor. I mean, rum.
Spirit.
Yeah. Spirit, exactly. And so what we do is we infuse the nibs in a cachaça that has been aged in a wood barrel already. The cachaça alone had been aged for 12 years, right? So it has this caramel color. So we use these stainless steel vats, and we put in enough of a ratio of cachaça to infuse the nibs for 30 days. So the nibs soak all of this flavor of the alcohol and the aged barrel, the wood taste. Once we dehydrate the nibs again, obviously it volatilizes all the alcohol. Unfortunately, we wish we could have an alcoholic caipirinha chocolate bar to sell.
It would make the bar untemperable.
Yeah, probably so. And then we go on to refining it. And at the same time, we also soak these lime zests into the cachaça, and they get powdered in the back of, like you showed. It's a beautiful, bar. Obviously, it has a little bit of sugar in the back too. It's a homage to the Brazilian drink, but a lot of people that have had the drink would really remind themselves that, this is now a chocolate version of a cachaça, a caipirinha drink, albeit with no alcohol.
Right. So you lose the alcoholic aspect of it, but some of the flavor of the cachaça does come through. But what really, really strikes me as being really, really nice about this is that even though you've taken the lime, you've peeled it, you've put it in the cachaça, you soaked it, then you've dehydrated it, right, and then powdered it, the lime comes through so bright and clean and clear. It's just
fresh. It's only lime. I mean, we have dozens and dozens of limes that are scraped. One of our girls here is an expert. She does really good. I've been trying to get her a machine so she could use the zester more automatically, but she does it by hand for now. And I missed out a step here. Before we take the nibs out of the cachaça, we do sprinkle a couple of limes in these concoction. So
gotcha.
The lime also, the nibs also get a little bit of an infusion of lime.
Right. So what's interesting here is that, I mean, again, whenever you have a bar like this, you need to try it 2 times, 2 different ways, one with the lime on your nose and one with the lime on your tongue, whatever is going on. And you'll get 2 very different ones. So either way, I mean, the aroma of this, the lime is there, but it's not overpowering. There's something deeper and richer about the aroma experience on this bar, right? The lime hits you right up front. No matter which way you eat it, lime up or lime down, the lime hits you. It's on the back end, right? After the lime has started to fade, then what happens is that some of the vanilla that comes from charred oak, right, and the sweetness that is associated with an aged rum, right, comes through, and then it beats back and forth with the lime. The lime comes in, and it's up here, and it's up in your nose and the top of your mouth, and the chocolate and the cachaça is down in the bottom. So it's like a total mouth experience.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to guess that if I didn't have to clear my palate, and by the way, this is lime tea, right, which is what I use as a palate cleanser.
Good.
But it's a different lime. Are you using a special Brazilian lime?
No,
or is it a Persian lime? Okay.
Just the green lime. I mean, over here in Brazil, they're a little larger than the ones you get in the US, but they're just basically limes.
Okay. So yum, yum, yum. And now the last bar is your number 1 selling bar.
Yeah.
I had a chance to correspond with Zelia Frangioni, and she said this is her favorite bar. I'm guessing that if the people are watching from Chocolates Deluxe, they'll say it's a high bar. And this is Maracujá, a passion fruit crunch.
Yes. Right.
So natural passion fruit pulp with cane sugar. So you're dehydrating fresh passion fruit pulp?
Again, as I said before, these 2 bars are the most labor-intensive and costly bars that we have here. Obviously, not only because we use an incredible amount of limes in the caipirinha, but also an incredible amount of fresh fruit, passion fruit here. Once we get the passion fruit, we dehydrate the pulp with the seeds, right? Make a praline out of that mixture.
It tastes candied.
Yes, but the extra juice that comes out before we dehydrate the actual pulp, that also gets into the nibs to infuse them. So the chocolate has an infusion of passion fruit, and the addition of the inclusion of the seeds in the back that are pralined gives you this other texture that I think adds, a great experience to this bar. It's, to me, a lot of passion fruit, and it's true passion fruit because we use nothing of oils or infusions other than the actual fresh fruit. So
as a judge, for people who may be listening for the first time, as a judge, I prefer to judge inclusions bars. If I have to do 70% 2-ingredient chocolates in a row, I get bored, right? And trying to distinguish them becomes very hard. But this bar has everything I want, flavored chocolate bar with the inclusions. And there's something about the crispy crunchiness because this is candied, right? And there's a crispiness to a sugar candy that's different from other forms of crispiness, like a deep fried crispiness,
right,
which comes through. Another thing is that many people often shy away from passion fruit, maracuja, right? Because it's just too acidic. It's just too sour. And one of the things that happens here as a result of your candying it is you get this unmistakable flavor of passion fruit. And if you know passion fruit, you go, oh my gosh, this is passion fruit. It's there on the nose immediately when you open up, but it's muted by the cocoa. Again, even though it's 65%, it feels like it's been roasted a little more. The chocolate's going to be a little more robust to hold up to the passion fruit. I understand why people call this their favorite bar. I'm surprised it only got a bronze. But that might be due to some of the judges not liking inclusions as much as other things rather than anything else. I mean, it's insanely.
We'll keep trying for a better score.
I'm sorry?
We'll keep trying for a better score at some of these competitions.
Number one is if you're going to go to a store and you're going to see passion fruit, you're not going to see a whole lot of passion fruit bars.
No.
Right. And often these stickers, number one, is they help convince distributors to pick up your bars, right? Because but if you've got it, people are going to go, oh God, passion fruit crunch, I really love it. They're not really going to pay attention to the fact that, oh, you only want, you quote unquote, only won a bronze, right? In doing it. But this is won in 2 different competitions in different years, which does talk a little bit about maintaining a consistent quality, right? And the people at Chocolates Deluxe in Germany say perfect match with a 65% chocolate. Absolutely, yes. I mean, this is so. Many people don't eat chocolate during the summer, right? And I'm going to say that this is a perfect summer chocolate.
There you go.
Sitting out there and you want, bam, the flavor of summer, even in the middle of winter. If you want the flavor of summer, this would be a bar to try because you just want, right, to do that. It's a pick me up. You put it in your mouth and you go, oh my gosh, this makes me happy, right? So, which is, when I've got, when I do my ratings and I do my own score on a scale of 0 to 4, number 4 is like, yeah, it puts a smile on my face, right? I want it. And so it's there on a personal rating system. Before we go, because we are at the hour, what I do want to point out really, really quickly, and thank you for your patience and all your time, and please extend my wishes to Juliana that she get better soon. I mean, I've had walking pneumonia. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I understand how miserable it can be, especially if you need to be functional, right, and do things. So please, please give her my best. And what I want to point out really, really quickly to everybody is that so this is the post for this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. Mm-hmm. So there's a run of show, right? There's a little bit of our history, which is here. All of the photos which I showed are here on the page. There's a link to the farm, Vale Potumuju. There is the photos of you, the link to Baianí's website in São Paulo, in Brazil. the map, the 5 bars we tasted are listed here. And then there are links in this little card here to Bar & Coco and to Chocolates Deluxe in Germany if you want to buy the bars. So all of that is here. I've also been in Brazil a number of times. And so there are a couple of posts. This Brazil photo blog was in my 2017 trip. If people don't know, here is Rogério Camé of Mestizo, Acelia Gallardo, Zelia Frangione, Claudia Schmidt. If you haven't been to Sao Paulo and you haven't seen the wall art, I hesitate to call it graffiti. I mean, it's amazing. The market, this is not the Pinheiros market. This is the big market downtown. If you want to go do samba dancing on a Saturday night, you can go do that. Best brigadeiros I've ever had were at the Ama shop in Sao Paulo, which is in Pinheiros, I think, which is no longer open. And perhaps my favorite restaurant signs in the world were here. And some pictures I took up in Bahia. So there is that here on this page as well as an interview that showed up on the Cacau website, Chocolate Purveyors. So if you're interested, you can learn a little bit more about them from this post. This is also the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. This episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. You can go click on the green join button, become a member. There's always a free membership level. But if you do have the resources to support the work that we do here, so I can bring you more of these kinds of interview and tasting episodes, please don't hesitate to support the work that we do here. And with that, Tuta, before we go, there's one more question from Giorgia Martone in Bologna, who wants to know, in your opinion, what is future challenge? So I think maybe what the most challenging future challenge the bean to bar producers have to face.
Well, I think there's quite a few, but I think the climate change has been something that sneaked upon us very, very fast. And although we've been only like really working at it at the farm for the last 12 years or so, we've really seen a downturn in a very fast one in the last 3 years or so. So that's very worrying because that really affects the ability of us craft quality cacao producers to really be able to, not only produce enough, but also keep the quality going, because the impact is not necessarily only getting enough cacao, but the climate change and the rainfall also affects the quality, the sensory value of the cacao. And we're learning a lot about that now as we get along with these issues. And we've had them in 2023, 2024, and now again in different levels in 2025. So I think number one, climate change. And number two, I think the economics of cacao have been, being obviously affected by productivity, but also by a lot of speculation. So there's a lot of that going on, and that really shifts the balance a little bit towards making the craft quality cacao producers understand that they have to continue making craft quality, although their spread now cannot be so large as before because the cacao prices are so high. And that's been a challenge here in Brazil. And that's one of the reasons we as an association here are trying to also unify a little more of this cacao chain into the chocolate making business. So these two, I think, are very important now.
I would have to agree with you, but what I do want to put a little my own spin on things is that the situation that we find ourselves in now was completely predictable, right? That big chocolate, since the 1970s at least, right, has deferred any direct investment in cacao farms and cacao farmers and cacao farming in major producing countries, right, especially West Africa. And so when there is a lack of systemic investment in the farms, and you chronically underpay. You do everything you can to keep the price as low as you possibly can. So the farmers don't have the resources to invest in their farms, right? What you do is when there is adverse weather or changes to the climate, which say, oh, there's too much water, there's not enough water, we have so much humidity that it increases the likelihood the trees are going to run into fungal disease and other problems. All of this was completely predictable. And the sad thing for me, listening to people over the last year or so, is that there's no indication by these companies that the solution to this problem is investment at the farm level. Right? They're all looking for, oh, let's go do fake cocoa alternatives, or
Yes.
It's just, Big Chocolate has to step up to the plate and said, this is our responsibility and we're going to pay for it. And I think that until we get to that aspect of things, it's going to be a real challenge. On that note, really quickly, I just wanted to say again to Chocolates Deluxe, thank you, Clay and Tuta. It's been our pleasure. I've enjoyed spending time in São Paulo with both you and Juliana, meeting your children, going out to nightclubs and things like that in the São Paulo area, seeing you. I haven't been to the farm yet, so stay on after the outro plays and we can talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
But let's just say with that, thank you very much, Tuta, for being here. And what I do want to remind everybody, as I do at the end of every single one of these episodes, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.